Welcome back, you guys. Thanks so much for listening to The Angle Perspectives of Toronto Real Estate. I'm your host, Amy Youngren, founder of North Group Real Estate. This is my team partner, business partner, Josh Miller. Josh, thanks for being here today.
My pleasure.
So Josh has over 20 years of pre-construction experience, both on the sales and management side. So I thought he was the perfect person to have this conversation with. And let's just get right into it. We live in a city where pre-construction is the norm. It's everywhere we turn. And I think that a question that a lot of buyers want to know the answer to, Josh, is what are the pros and cons of buying pre-con over resale? We dive into that.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like you said, I mean, I have a lot of background in the pre-construction world, so I've seen the all of the amazing positive sides to people buying pre-con, and then I've also seen, some of the other scenarios where people have run into trouble. So I think pros and cons. It also depends on like what type of buyer you are, whether you're an investor, whether you're an end user, first time buyer. But I'll try to keep it more general. I think for a lot of people, one of the biggest pros about buying pre-con over resale is it's just easier. There's a lot you can sort of push back all the hassles and responsibilities of buying a property for years. So, for example, if you're buying a pre-construction condo project in the very early stages, you're probably not moving in or closing on that property for 4 to 6 years, let's say, depending on the size of the building. So for an investor who, in my experience, investors are generally the majority of buyers in pre-construction. Obviously, there's a lot of end users as well, but it typically ends up being more investors. And for investors who do want to push those responsibilities back, whether that's, there's extended deposit structures when you're buying pre-construction. You're not dropping 20%, right away, taking a mortgage right away, closing right away. If you're a long-term investor, getting a tenant in there right away and becoming a landlord. If those are things that you'd like to push back a little bit, you can put down your deposit sort of 5% at a time, spaced out over a few years. You don't have to worry about financing your purchase for, like I said, potentially 4 to 6 years. So you don't have to worry about taking on a mortgage. You may have money in other investments, other properties that, you want to see through a little bit further. And yeah, I think especially a lot of first-time investors they want to get into the market as an investor, but they like the idea of not really having to deal with it for a while because they're not super comfortable about maybe, becoming a landlord right away. So I think that's probably the number one thing. It tends to just be something where you can push back your responsibilities and the hassles for quite a while. We kind of touched on extended deposit structure. That's a really big pro for pre-construction. Again, if you're buying something in the very early stages, typically you're getting about approximately a year and a half to 2 years to put down your first 15% spaced out. Again, it changes from project to project, but let's just say approximately every 6 months, or there's within intervals through that first year and a half to 2 years, and then you have another 5% that isn't due until you occupy that unit, which again could be 4 to 6 years down the road. So that's a big pro.
So with
Yeah.
pre-construction versus resale, you still have all the same factors. It just sounds like with pre-construction, everything is delayed. So you still have a deposit. You just instead of paying it up front, you pay it incrementally over time. You still have to close on the property and manage it, but instead of doing it right away, you're doing it further down the road when the property is completed. So you're still dealing with all the same factors, but with pre-construction, you've got a lot more time to get into that process.
Absolutely. That's exactly it. And I think, again, like I said, for investors especially, they find that really helpful. I mean, some of the other kind of obvious pros about buying pre-construction, it's brand new. You're buying something that is brand new. It's never been lived in. And along with that, there's a few other benefits as well. Obviously, there's some level of customization when you're buying something brand new, choosing your finishes to a certain extent. And then you get your full warranty, which in a resale, You're never going to get a full warranty if you're buying a resale that maybe is only a year or two old. There's, some warranty coverage still there, but it is nice. People like the idea of buying something brand new, choose their finishes, and have a full warranty.
And I think that's a big perk. I think people love that, especially
Mhm.
the opportunity, like you said, when you want to be able to choose and pick everything that is going to be in your property, whether you're going to live in it or for investment. But let's look at a scenario. Maybe you could share an idea. When would it make more sense to buy pre-construction versus resale, if that exists?
Yeah. Yeah, no, no, absolutely. Like, so there's a few different situations where I think it makes a lot of sense to buy resale. My experience is more with investors and I guess like parents who want to buy something for their younger kids. I mean, it's an investment as well. They're looking at it more though as the parents are looking at it more as a way to give their kids a foothold in the GTA real estate market, which like we all know it's becoming, increasingly less affordable all the time. So a lot of parents are kind of thinking down the road of how are my kids ever going to afford something, a property in the GTA. Let me get a head start. It's really convenient for parents, maybe who have kids who would never even potentially be living in there for, 10 or 15 years even, but at least it gives them a little bit more wiggle room where they can say, great, I can help my kid get into the market now, or my kids, if they have multiple kids. Um, Again, space out my deposits, not worry about financing this project or this purchase for 4 to 6 years. And then the amount of time that they do have to manage it, be a landlord, do whatever they are going to do with it until they hand it over to the kids, is a much shorter amount of time than if they were buying a resale where they had a tenant in right away. I'd say that's probably the majority of my buyer clients, are exactly those people, similar age to myself, kids that are sort of whatever, 8 to 15 years old. And then the other group of clients that I work with quite a bit on pre-construction are just, your typical investors. They're not buying for their kids necessarily. They just want to invest in real estate. And again, usually first-time investors or investors who, they're not doing this for a living. They just want to have an additional piece of real estate. Love the ease of investing in pre-construction. And then I think first-time buyers, I don't work with as many first-time buyers, but I think there's a lot of benefits to first-time buyers in buying pre-construction. Again, just from the ability, gives you time to save money. You obviously have to have some money saved up to make some initial deposits, and you have to feel pretty good about your career and your whatever you want to call it, savings potential, and ability to close. But it buys you time to save more money to get to that 20% deposit, but you don't have to wait and buy in a market in 4 years from now where it's, potentially going to be a lot more expensive. So I'd say those are probably the three groups of
Yeah.
people that buy pre-construction mostly.
Well, and it's such a great way, like you said, for first-time buyers to get into the market, and even maybe they're not even planning to live there eventually in that property. Maybe they do, but if not, then at least they're invested and they're in the market, and well on their way.
Yeah, for sure. Earlier in my career, I did work with a lot of first-time buyers and first-time investors too. I've worked with a lot of clients who've built an insane amount of wealth through buying pre-construction. Now, this is over a long period of time. It's not an easy, get rich quick kind of thing. They've really benefited from the real estate market over the last 15 years, but just regular people. I have one client she was a teacher. She was actually a new teacher, so didn't even have, crazy income. Bought her first pre-construction property, still lived at home with her parents. That went up in value. A few years later, bought another pre-construction property. I think she has four pre-construction properties now. Some of them have gone up, by over 100%. And she's still teaching. But I mean, she's laughing because she has, these.
She's building her wealth through real estate.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. She's a happy client.
I love that. So
Yeah.
if I'm thinking about buying pre-construction, what are some of the major considerations that should be top of my mind? I know I know this could be an entire episode in and of itself, but what are the
For
top
sure.
two or three that you would
Yeah.
needs to be thinking about?
I think like sort of really important purchase considerations, maybe not specific to like what project to buy in, but just things to make sure that you're aware of, I guess, before you buy would be, um, I mean, if it's an investment, especially, just make sure you understand what the HST and capital gains and all the different tax implications are. Speak to a lawyer, speak to an accountant, speak to your realtor ahead of time, and just make sure that you're on top of that, because depending on what you're planning to do with the property, there are different implications there. I would say also, and we're really seeing an example of this in today's market, when you're buying, whatever your reason for buying, end user, investor, make sure that you understand the different markets that you could have to close in, and have a plan to close in any of them. So for example, right now we're seeing people are having to close with much higher interest rates than I think they ever expected. And for some people, that's a problem. They're not able to close. And it's just something that maybe they didn't foresee this, but if you plan ahead and you understand that there are different markets that you may have to close in, buyer's market, seller's market, high inventory, high interest rates, low interest rates, you're going to feel a lot more confident about your purchase. And then I think another one really would be, there's additional closing costs that you need to be aware of when you're buying pre-construction that don't exist in resale. And then probably just knowing that there's a date that you're going to be given, an estimated occupancy date for the project, but there are often delays there, sometimes a year, even a year and a half. So for investors, a lot of time they're very happy with that. But if that's something that you're planning to live in and you have, your whole life planned out and you're planning it around that estimated occupancy date, be ready for some delays.
Good, really good advice. Okay, so I've done all my due diligence. I'm got my ducks in a row financially. I've decided I want to buy pre-construction. How do I figure out what project to buy into?
I think just like any real estate purchase, the number one thing that you're going to take into consideration is location, right? What's the right location for you to buy in? That's going to depend on your personal situation. Are you buying something for yourself? You want to be close to work. If you're looking more just from an investment standpoint, are you trying to pick between, a much more established neighborhood, established area of the city? Or are you looking to maybe take a bit more of a gamble and pay a little bit less money and get into an area that you think is up and coming? So, I mean, those are things to think about: location, the reputation and the experience of the developer, and ideally, if you know this, the construction company that are bringing the project to market and building it out. That's very important. Not to say that there aren't some amazing projects that have been built by newer, less experienced developers, but I think you don't want any surprises. You want to make sure you understand that, if you're working with someone that's a bit more experience, has a better reputation, you typically pay a bit of a premium for that, but you also have, more peace of mind about what is going to be delivered to you. Newer developers sometimes put together unbelievable projects. They price a little bit lower. They add additional value because they're trying to build their reputation. But, there is that sort of risk that their lack of experience, could be something that, I don't want to say could come back to haunt you, but they could provide an inferior project to something that, a developer that's more experienced would provide. And then I think like pricing, obviously, you want to make sure if you're buying in a pre-construction project, you are aware of the other projects in the neighborhood and the one that you're looking at is competitively priced.
So I know that when you're buying pre-construction, that you can just go to a developer's sales office and deal directly with the reps that are there for the project. What do you think, as we wrap up this episode, is the benefit of having an agent represent you, having your own, as a buyer, having your own representation when dealing with pre-construction?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things. I think just in general, your agent is looking out for you. The builder's listing agent is looking out for their client, who is the developer. So they may not point out some of the really important factors to you, such as, there is sometimes some negotiation with the agreement of purchase and sale. Depending on what stage you buy at, it may not be price that you're negotiating on, but just there are some really important clauses that you want to have added into an agreement of purchase and sale that usually aren't there unless you negotiate them. So I think, just having someone that's on your side, obviously, ideally someone who's experienced, who knows, has a pre-construction background, who knows what they're doing, can be extremely helpful. Also, the way that pre-construction projects work is there's, sort of an initial VIP launch usually that's only available to realtors. And it's typically like, I don't want to say a small group of realtors, but, realtors that are experienced in pre-construction and have the contacts there. And that's usually when the units are priced at their lowest. That's when you have the most choice of units. And then through the sales cycle, developers raise the price, units sell, so there's less choice. So if you're able to get in with a realtor who can get you in at that VIP launch or in an earlier phase of the sales cycle before it becomes available to the public, it could save you a lot of money and obviously get you a better unit as well.
Yeah. I think that we need to have you come back and have part 2 of this conversation because it's been a good one. I'm confident it's going to be well received. Thanks for joining us, Josh. We're going to, we'll call it a wrap for today. We're going to come back with part 2 of The Angle, where we dive a little bit deeper into pre-construction with Josh Miller. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Thanks, Amy.